Ashby.
Good morning. Sex workers and curb crawlers in Birmingham are being warned of a new crackdown on prostitution by police in the city. Under Operation Scarlet, if sex workers get 3 cautions, they'll be arrested and sent straight to court. Nearly 40 prostitutes have been cautioned so far, with 7 arrested. Last night, BBC WM joined officers on an operation in the Hagley Road area. Any motorist suspected of using prostitutes could be cautioned and sent on a rehabilitation course. Inspector Jason Wathis is from West Midlands Police, and he has this message for any curb crawlers.
You need to know if you are using prostitutes within the Edgbaston area. There are people that are monitoring CCTV cameras. You will be visited, or you will have a letter through your door saying your vehicle has been seen in a red light area if you're not actually stopped by one of my police officers and named and shamed at court.
And Adrian Garberg will have more.
BBC WM. West Midlands Police have launched a crackdown on streetwalkers and curb crawlers in Edgbaston and Ladywood, in and around the Hagley Road. If you're listening to that and you live in one of the West Midlands' other red light districts, in, let's say, Wolverhampton, in Walsall, in other parts of Birmingham, are you thinking, and a good thing too, it's about time they crack down on this menace? Or do you think it's just a waste of time and that it's not called the oldest profession for nothing and that it will never go away? Give us a call, 08453 00 9956, or you can text me on 81333. Start your message with WM. So many different countries have different approaches to sex work, don't they? You can think of the famous red light district of Amsterdam or of Hamburg, or of Sweden, where if you are a man who buys sex, you become a criminal. They target not the sex workers, but the Johns, the punters. What do you reckon? How can we ever deal with this situation? Should we try and clamp down on it, or do we just have to accept it as a part of life? 08453 00 9956. Catherine Stevens joins me in the studio. She's been working in the sex industry for more than 10 years and is working in Birmingham now. Catherine, very good morning to you. How are you?
Hi, good to be here.
Thanks for coming in. Why are you a sex worker?
I work for the same reason most people do. This is the way I earn my living. It's the way I pay my bills. And I work with an organisation called the International Union of Sex Workers, and one of the things we campaign for is policy based on evidence. One of the things that's frustrating about the kind of policing approach that you're talking about is not only does it fail to solve the problems for people in the sex industry, it actually makes our lives more dangerous, but it actually increases the impact on the community. We've got evidence that that is what happens, because what happens when you have a crackdown, as you describe, is that people will work over a wider area, so there's greater impact on the community because they're trying to avoid the police. They'll have to work longer hours to earn the same money, so again, a greater impact on the community. There'll be more competition for clients, and also in some cases, people will more aggressively approach people as clients. So again, there's more impact on the community. So it's not, and also it's known, there's evidence that it increases the dangers people face because people will work in more isolated areas, so they're more vulnerable. And of course, massively, it decreases trust in the police. So I'd say we need to start treating sex workers as if we're part of the community rather than a problem for it, and actually find solutions that create a better situation for both people in the sex industry and the communities of which we're part.
If you have got streetwalkers and curb crawlers in your local area, and some of the punters are approaching your wife, your girlfriend or if you are indeed one of those wives or girlfriends, and you're being approached by men for sex, and you've got car doors slamming every hour of the night, you can understand how that might be disruptive and annoying to people in a neighbourhood, can't you?
Absolutely, and that's why I want to see solutions that actually work. And one of the problems is, because of the policing approach that's often taken, one of the most significant perpetrators of violence against women who sell sex on street are members of the general public. And whilst absolutely we recognise that street sex work can cause a problem for the community, that doesn't excuse verbal abuse, cups of urine being thrown, physical violence. There have been cases of women having cars driven at them, both in Birmingham and in other cities. So that kind of violence is not the way for.
So are you suggesting that the sort of the shunning of sex workers by the police, the shaming, if you like, and I heard that word used by a West Midlands police officer today, it sort of stigmatises an already very badly stigmatised profession and makes people feel that they can have a go at you?
Exactly, and for people who are in the sex industry, many people work in the sex industry indoors. 3/4 of the industry in the UK is actually indoors. But for people who are selling sex on street, often they're doing that because that's the only way they're able to feed their drug habit. And again, this doesn't increase the range of options that are available to them. It doesn't make it easier. It actually often makes it more difficult for them to take up services that may enable them to decrease their drug use and so move on to other ways of earning a living.
Catherine, we'll come back to you in a moment. It's 9:15. We're approaching the time when we have our latest travel update. Throw it over to you as well. This latest crackdown by West Midlands Police on streetwalkers and on curb crawlers around the Hagley Road in Edgbaston and Ladywood. Have you been inconvenienced by a curb crawler? Are you a woman who's been approached by a man looking for sex when you haven't been selling it? What's it like to live in a red light district? Do you welcome what the police are doing? Or do you agree with Catherine that the way the police are operating only stigmatises women who are already looked down on by many people in society? Does it make it more dangerous for these women? 084 CWM, we've got Catherine Stevens in the studio. She is a sex worker in Birmingham, and Catherine has just told me that she is happy to take your calls about her job. I've described it as the oldest profession. West Midlands Police, though, seem to think they can eradicate it, certainly around the Hagley Road in Edgbaston and Ladywood. So I'd love to hear from you this morning if you live in one of the West Midlands, I have to say, quite numerous red light districts. I'm not going to name them, but you will know that there are other parts of Birmingham, that there are parts of Walsall, there are parts of Wolverhampton, which are known as red light districts. Do these clampdowns, these crackdowns, ever work? Should we be thinking of a different way of dealing with sex workers? What do you reckon? Should we go down the route of Amsterdam and have authorised, licensed red light districts? Should we do what Sweden has done and make it illegal to buy sex? Because if men are scared off, then if there's no demand, there'll be no supply, will there? 08453 00 9956. Give us a bell or drop me a text to 81333. Start your message with WM. As I say, Catherine, more than happy to take your calls this morning on BBC WM, the voice of Birmingham and the Black Country. Steve's on the M6. Good morning, Steve.
Hello, good morning.
Steve. Yeah, you've got a question for Catherine, I think, yeah?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Steve, loud and clear. What do you want to say to Catherine? Hello, Steve. Oh, a slight problem with Steve there. I don't know if Steve was going to ask this question, but one question asked Catherine. Does your sex worker pay tax and national insurance? I don't know if this is Steve's question. Hello, Steve, how are you?
Good morning, Adrian.
Yeah, what were you going to say, my friend?
I agree with what you said about it's the oldest profession in the world, and I'm a truck driver, and I drive all over the country, and it goes on in every town. And I haven't got a problem with it, as long as it's adults and they're doing it in, it's not in a public place. What I'd like to ask the young lady is she registered with the HMRC? Does she pay tax? Does she pay national insurance? Because I know she uses the National Health Service. I'm self-employed. I have to pay tax. Does she?
Good question. Let Catherine answer it.
I think it's really interesting that that's often one of the first questions that people ask. And absolutely, HMRC will take our money. We don't have the same rights as people in other occupations. So, for example, it's illegal for us to work together with any venue that has more than one person in it. Somebody there is at risk of arrest, which is not the case.
Because that would be classed as a brothel if
Absolutely.
Two of you were working together. Yeah.
And we don't even have to be there at the same time. So the law actually makes our lives more dangerous. The law actually makes it more dangerous if we call the police. And so, yes, absolutely, the tax office will take our money, but we do not have the same rights as other people.
But just to answer Steve's question directly then, you do pay tax
Yes.
and national insurance. How about that, Steve? She does pay tax and national insurance.
And I'm sure that all the hundreds of girls that are employed in the industry do the same, which is...
Well, many people do.
It's not true, is it?
Well, it's interesting because many people do, and there's actually a website that is set up that gives escorts tax advice, and they produce several guides, both online and on paper, and so actually there are people who are very keen to pay tax. I was actually in a brothel that was visited by the VAT, and the woman there was actually really glad to see them. The woman who was running the place was actually really glad to see them because she was like, "Well, I'd like to do this, but I don't know how, so can you help me?" And they were very confused because this was not the normal experience they had when they visited premises.
So, Steve, thanks very much indeed for your call. 08453 00 9956. This is an email from Jonathan in Hall Green. He says, sorry I can't phone, but I wanted to make a comment about this morning's news about a crackdown by police on street prostitution in Edgbaston. I have every sympathy with residents in those areas. This is a difficult problem to live with, but I greet the news with a real sense of déjà vu. I was active in Borsall Heath some years ago, I still am, when there was a major action to drive prostitution out of the area. At one level, it was successful, but I never fully supported the action by police in the community. It was evident that ultimately the action would simply drive the problem elsewhere, and so it has turned out. The focus is always on the women involved, with no real attempt to understand how they get into this way of life. There was a very good local organisation working with the women, providing long-term help and support, but the focus and resources always went to the police and community action. The issue of street prostitution will never be properly tackled unless the root causes are seriously addressed, and that means facing up to poverty, which is now increasing through current government actions and increased with the actions of the previous Labour government as well. I do not believe this problem will ever be effectively tackled unless it is done at national, not local level, and the focus is on the root causes rather than the effects.
And that's absolutely the case. I mean, as I said earlier, one of the problems with police actions like this is it doesn't increase the range of options available to people, and it makes people more desperate. It makes people work in a way that is more dangerous. So what we'd like to see is community policing that is safety-led and more money going into services. So it does actually enable people to change the way they work. So one of the things that's happened in some areas, a friend of mine runs a project in Hackney in North London, and they're overwhelmingly, people are taking appointments over the phone. Women who were selling sex on the street are now working from mobile phones with regular clients and only going out when they need to top up on that. So we need to see more money going into services so that people can work in ways that are safer and have less impact on the community.
Catherine, let me ask you this, though, because I drive around the West Midlands and whatever the rules are on brothels, I go past a number of places that are offering massages that I believe, whether rightly or wrongly, are almost certainly selling sex. They may offer various forms of therapy, which I believe, again, I may be mistaken, to be a euphemism for sex. So it is quite possible to sell sex from premises. Why do women still go on the street to sell it?
Working from premises, whether you're working from your own venue or from premises run by someone else, can be more difficult than selling sex on street. And again, if somebody is using drugs, particularly, I mean, I don't know what the drugs of choice are on the street scene in Birmingham, but, you know, sort of certainly in most areas, you're looking at people who are using heroin, they're using crack, they may also be using alcohol. And those people are not necessarily going to be able to work a 12-hour shift in a sauna or in a brothel. With crack, one of the problems is that people need to top up during the day. It's quite the buzz you get from crack is quite short. So you need to be able to kind of step out and sit and buy drugs, take drugs while you're working. So it's not going to be possible for people to necessarily work in premises. And that's why generally people who are selling sex on street are usually the people with the fewest options, the least resources. And it's I mean, from my point of view, somebody who has, I mean, I've always worked indoors. I'm lucky. My drugs of choice are caffeine and sugar, which are cheap and legal and easily available. But if we won't take a different approach to street prostitution on the grounds of compassion, do it from the common sense approach that it is actually, what we're doing now is really expensive. We've had criminalisation of street prostitution since 1959. That's more than a 50-year trial period. If it was going to work, we'd have noticed by, sometime in the 80s. Street prostitution is still massively a problem. It's for both communities and for the people who are selling sex on street. So let's actually take action based on the evidence, provide better services and work with the police to create a situation that is safer.
I suppose, though, if we are concerned citizens and worried about the health and well-being of our fellows, you know, if you're describing a situation where many street prostitutes have drug problems that need topping up, as society, we can't just ignore that, can we?
And there are services for people, both drug users and street sex workers. There's an organisation called the UK Network of Sex Work Projects, which represents about 60 projects across the UK. It has members in Birmingham, and one of the problems is that many of those services are dramatically underfunded. Again, I was doing quite a bit of work in London in the run-up to the Olympics, and the service that ran support services across, I think, 3 of the host boroughs of the Olympics actually had their funding cut in the run-up to the Olympics.
Catherine, I want to bring in Paul in Wolverhampton. Hello, Paul.
The guy earlier really stole my question when he said about, are they paying income tax and national insurance?
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of these girls, are on the dole and they're just doing it to, as a bit of extra cash and buy the latest plasma screens. And no, all this lady's doing is harping on and bleating on about their rights and how they are done to. And it just doesn't make sense to me. If it's illegal to do it, the bleating on, we can't have this, we can't do that. When the guy actually asked a direct question, does she pay tax in that, instead of coming out and saying yes or no, we got a speech about the rights of prostitutes.
All right, so what's your point, Paul?
The point is that, it's half these people doing, it's their career choice. They decided to do this. And yet all we're hearing is what a hard life it is. It's their choice. It's their lifestyle choice.
I think actually a lot of people do make a choice to be in the industry, but also in terms of street prostitution, those people are not necessarily able to make the best choice that is available for them. They're choosing from a very limited range of options. And although I don't agree with what you're saying, I understand that for a lot of people get very frustrated about the ongoing impact of street prostitution. And what I'm saying is that we need to actually seek solutions to that. And one of the ways we'll find solutions is making policy based on evidence. Policy that solves problems is based in reality, is based on evidence. And one of the things we know, there is extensive academic data about this that shows that the policing approach being taken doesn't solve the problems and actually increases the impact on the community.
Thanks very much indeed. Paul in Wolverhampton. Jude in Wensfield says some of the mums at my school bragged they earned £500 a week plus tax-free and they still wanted free school meals. Little June in Bearwood says you are never going to get rid of prostitution, so they should legalise it like in Holland. Another texter says Catherine did not address the point about nuisance to residences. She just commented on how sex workers are abused by the general public. Will Catherine address the original question, please?
Yeah, I'm sorry if you feel I haven't come across on that. Basically, yes, absolutely. Street sex work can have an impact on residents. And when I was talking about the impact of crackdowns, I was trying to say we know that it increases the hours that women are out earning the same amount of money. It increases the area that women are working over to avoid the police. And as one of the earlier kind of commenters made the point, one of the things that can happen is if you put a huge amount of police resources into it, which is taking time and money away from investigating other crimes, what you may do is successfully move prostitution possibly several miles across a town from one area to another, which is a huge waste of time and money and resources. So absolutely, yes, there is an impact on the community. Does that excuse violence by members of the community? Of course it doesn't. And I don't think many of your listeners would say that it does. So what we need to do is actually look at creating long-term solutions. And that's about providing services, about increasing options, and about working with the community to find solutions.
Catherine, we'll come back to you in just a moment. Catherine will be here for, say, the next 10 minutes or so, taking your calls this morning. Catherine Stevens is a sex worker, and she's talking this morning about the West Midlands Police crackdown on curb crawlers and street walkers around the Hagley Road in Edgbaston and Ladywood. If you live in Edgbaston and Ladywood. How much of a problem are these streetwalkers and curb crawlers to you? Or indeed, if you live in one of the red light districts of Walsall or of Wolverhampton or of other parts of Birmingham. 08453 00 9956. The West Midlands Police wasting their time and your money with this crackdown. The time now is 9:30. Let's get a word with Jenny in Tamworth. Good morning, Jenny. How are you?
Good morning, Adrian. I'm fine, thank
Good.
you.
What's your observation, Jenny?
My observation is, Adrian, that I would much prefer that the police use their time and my money to prosecute mobile phone users when they're driving. I did make a flippant remark that as far as I knew, nobody had died from sex workers, but that was too flippant because people have been murdered. But, you know, to me, the money would be far better spent on catching people who use their mobile phones on the roads. We all see them all day and every day.
So, I mean, would you just say to the police, just forget about it, call it off?
Well, yeah, personally, I don't know why they don't legalise it and make it healthier for everybody concerned.
So that you would have what? Red light districts like Amsterdam, like Hamburg, special zones where people can go if they want to buy and sell sex and where the health of the women is properly supervised.
Well, don't you think that would be more healthier and safer for everybody concerned? And then people wouldn't be pestered on the streets either.
What about that, Catherine?
Well, what sex workers groups internationally advocate is decriminalisation rather than legalisation. We take the view that the sexual behaviour of consenting adults is not a place for the state to regulate. And New Zealand and several states in Australia have decriminalised, and that seems to have worked really well. There's a lot of evidence from New Zealand, which has a lot of similarities with the UK, that actually kind of people's safety at work has increased, access to health services has been going well, and it enables people to work together without, for example, having to register people. Schemes where people, for example, have to register their name and address if their work is a sex worker tend to fail as regulatory frameworks because, as many people could understand, they don't necessarily want their local authority or the national government to have them on a list with their name and address saying that they're doing this. So we advocate decriminalisation, and generally legalised regimes like Amsterdam, they always exclude the most vulnerable people because they tend to exclude people who are drug users, they tend to exclude people who are undocumented migrants, and what that means is you end up with a two-tier system where there is still huge potential for abuse, and those people still don't have protection of the law. One of the things I'd like to finish on is the kind of Swedish model, which you've mentioned a couple of times, which criminalises people who pay for sex. Now, Sweden, although they presented this as a great kind of feminist leap forward, they explicitly excluded people who sell sex from being consulted about this. And actually what that legislation does, it says our consent to sex doesn't count. It's like an inversion of the old idea that you can't rape a hooker, except now it doesn't count when we say yes, instead of it not counting when we say no. The evidence from Sweden, the National Board of Health and Welfare has conducted 3 major surveys since that legislation was brought in, and they've been very clear that they basically have no idea what's happened to the numbers. There's no evidence that prostitution has decreased, and there's still street prostitution in a number of cities in Sweden, but what people have reported is there's lack of services, and there's great fear of the police and fear of the state from people in the sex industry. So overall, decriminalisation is what has been shown to work the best of those 3 options. Let's speak to Matt in Birmingham. Hello, Matt. How are you, mate?
Yeah, fine, thanks.
Yeah, what's your thought, Matt?
Just a quick question about opening a brothel. What licences, rules and regulations you require to open a brothel?
What, you'd like to open a brothel?
Yeah.
Why?
Why not?
Well, I'll ask. What problems would Matt face there, Catherine?
Well, basically, at the moment, any premises in which more than one person is selling sexual services is a brothel, and that's illegal. So what that means is if you and I, Adrian, were working in the same flat, even if we're never there at the same time, whoever's name is on the tenancy agreement or whoever owns the mortgage for the property is potentially at risk of arrest, could go to prison for up to 7 years.
And, I mean, Matt, in his case, then, could be had up for living on immoral earnings, for example.
The term now used is controlling for gain. That's in the Sexual Offence Act 2003. And like legislation about brothel keeping, it doesn't refer to any kind of abuse or exploitation. In fact, the appeal court judgment that defined how controlling for gain would be enforced in UK law explicitly includes people who are working of their own free will. And so what that does is it means that any way we work together, somebody is at risk of arrest. So the law builds in isolation and builds in vulnerability. So one of the things that's happened is that there are premises that have been targeted by gangs because they know that people are at risk if they call the police. One of the responses to that, there's a thing called the UK-wide Ugly Mugs programme. And that's the situation. It's run by the UK Network of Sex Work Projects. And that's a way that people in the sex industry can report crimes against us without contacting the police. Because, as I say, that is dangerous. To give one particular example, a friend of mine who works in a brothel in Camden, absolutely it's illegal. There's a whole bunch of people working there. She does a shift once or twice a week, and she talked to the guy who runs the place and said, well, I'd like to try working during the days in the run-up to the Olympics. So they gave it a try. He said, well, yeah, that's fine, just you organise it. She was convicted for assisting in running a brothel on the basis of 20 texts by which she was organising for somebody else to be there at the same time that she was. So the way the law is enforced is very, very wide-ranging.
Thanks very much indeed for that, Catherine. I think the short answer is, Matt, you've got a few properties, have you?
Yes, I have, yeah.
Not worth doing, mate, I think, is the bottom line. You'll be a criminal, my friend, but lovely to hear from you anyway. Kevin's in Borsall Heath. Hello, Kevin.
Good morning, Adrian.
And Borsall Heath, of course, used to be notorious as a red light district, didn't it?
That's right. But you see, Adrian, I've got 2 points and I've got 2 views of looking at it.
Yeah.
One, when it used to happen, because it, as you know, because Borsall Heath is a red light, I used to feel safer on the road because there was always something about. So you always felt safe. You didn't have to get involved. You're seeing it, but you didn't have to get involved.
So just because there was traffic, there was busyness in your area at night.
You felt safe for walking out on the road.
Yeah.
Whereas if you look at Borsall Heath now, it's not. I don't like it now. I prefer it when it was inundated with traffic, but the people who lived in the area got together to clean it up. Obviously, there were parts of Borsall Heath that it was a nuisance, and I can see it from their point of view. But nobody forced those women to go out there and do it. They do it off their own back. So at the end of the day, it's like any other job. You either put up with it, like it, or don't like it. If you don't like it, simple, move out.
Kevin, very interesting goal. Kevin preferred Borsall Heath when it was a red light district. When you say that there are people who aren't forced into it, that's not always true, though, isn't it, Catherine? I mean, we have this image of people, young girls who might be persuaded to go down the route, getting hooked on drugs, and they're then controlled by their pimp. That does go on, doesn't it?
That kind of... It does happen, but that kind of the old-fashioned model of a guy who's running a group of people, a group of women, I'm not hearing about that at all. I've not heard about that for many years. And in terms of, that's one of the problems with the law, because the law doesn't successfully target coercion. It means that people who are working in situations of free will are treated equally with those who are in situations of abuse, which is really useless in terms of targeting abused young girls in the way that you're talking about. In terms of trafficking, we do have quite a lot of information about the proportion of trafficking within the UK sex industry. There have been a number of academic studies. There's a really big piece of police work that was very well conducted. And all those came up with a figure of roughly about 7% of the total people in the sex industry are victims of trafficking in terms of being subjected to fear, to force, or fraudulent means of getting into the industry. So absolutely there is coercion, and we need to target that, which we're failing to do at the moment. In terms of people feeling safer when the streets are busier, I mean, actually Kevin's not alone in that point of view. Again, some of the documentation we have about community responses to street prostitution, that is something quite often that people report.
Catherine, thank you. Let's get a word with Raj in Handsworth. Raj, hello.
Morning, Adrian.
You've got a question, I think, for Catherine, yeah?
Yeah, well, I live in a so-called red light area. It's on the Heathfield Road in Handsworth. We've had prostitutes there for many, many years, and people living around the area have just got used to it, despite various police crackdowns and interventions. Really, my question is, Catherine, you were very articulate in the way you express yourself and selling your pitch, but you spoke about the effect on the local community, and you appreciate that the actions that these women take part in does have an effect on the local community. But what I would say to you is that do you really appreciate that? Because I've got prostitutes right outside my house every single night. They're an absolute nuisance. We've got drug dealers. We've got the people coming for this sexual activity. They're doing it out on the streets. We got condoms. You know, it's just brought a whole heap of antisocial behaviour alongside it. And these prostitutes don't live in the area. They come into the area because they know that this is where the punters are. So, you know, really the question is, do you really appreciate that you are part of the community? If you do, you need to look at yourself and say, look, how is this affecting the local community and how do we need to change the situation?
And that's exactly why we need to have find solutions or work with the solutions that we know will go towards solving those problems. And that can involve kind of extensive outreach. It can involve drug support services. It can involve safety-led policing.
But Raj, with respect, Catherine, I mean, I'm not saying he doesn't care about these things. I'm sure at a human level he does. What he wants is prostitutes not to be plying for trade on his street and for dealers to be feeding the prostitutes' habits on his street. And he doesn't want their Johns to be making a noise or having sex publicly in his street. That's what Raj really cares about.
Absolutely. I can completely understand that. And I mean, he's talked about having police crackdowns in the area before. So, we have, he's seen for himself that community has been failed by that policing approach because that's happened. And then they give it another few years and it happens again. And they give it another few years and it happens again. The problem doesn't go away. That's why we need to work in the way that we know is more likely to provide solutions, because police crackdowns don't work. They make headlines, they make arrests, they make some money for the police because they will seize cash from some of the women that they're arresting, but they do not solve the problems associated with street prostitution, and that's what we need to actually start tackling.
Raj, what would you say to that?
Well, just another aspect to it. I mean, my wife, she's been approached now on 2 occasions, just walking down the street by people in cars, and just on one instance, people groped her. So that was very distressful for myself and my family and my wife in particular. These are all excuses. Women know exactly what they're doing. They're either doing it for the drugs or the ones that, they want an extra piece of income. When I first saw it, I had a lot of sympathy for the women. I said, okay, there must be a dire situation to be able to go out and do this thing. But unfortunately, over the years, I've been losing that sympathy.
Raj, I know you've spoken before about the problem of prostitution on BBC WM on this show, and I know I bumped into you as well when I went down to our BBC WM summer tour bus a couple of days. This week I will come to your house and I will observe firsthand the problems that you're facing with prostitution. Thanks very much indeed for joining in. One final question for you, Catherine. I'm very grateful to you for spending the time and coming into the studio and taking calls from listeners. You are obviously a fiercely intelligent woman, incredibly articulate. Why do you spend your life as a sex worker?
It's a job that really suits me, and I get told that I'm good with my mouth in that context too. But for me, this is a job that I really enjoy. I see a lot of disabled clients, so I see a lot of people who are dealing with kind of paralysis or life-shortening conditions. And I see a lot of ordinary people, kind of, sort of middle-aged guys in the mid-afternoon. And if it's the right job for you, it can be a really good job.
You enjoy it?
Yes, I do. I really like my work, and I'm really lucky because that's something that not a lot of people can say in any area of work. And I work in a way that is very private and is very discreet, and that's the case for most people in the sex industry across the UK. I'd be really interested to hear about your experience with Raj. I'm really gratefully called in, and I'd be really glad. I mean, it'd be great if I was able to come with you. I'd really like to see that.
See if we can sort that out. Catherine, thanks very much indeed. There's Catherine Stevens. She's a sex worker in Birmingham. You've heard her talking on BBC WM this morning. We're responding. Reaction this morning to this red light crackdown. Barry says curb crawlers don't pay tax. Well, those who sometimes lay curbs don't pay tax. Quite a few in the construction industry get cash in hand. John in Codsall says man and women are animals. Man needs sex. It's his genetics. Woman is the attractant. Game over. This is from Richard in Great Bar. He says, re-prostitution, why don't people mind their own business and leave these people alone? These opinionated people who feel they have to control every aspect of life need to get a life themselves. Go away, says Richard. And Millie in Aston says, they come in the car park in front of our homes and have sex anytime they feel like it, day or night. So the police are wasting their time. And John in Codsall says, it's the pimps and the drug dealers they need to put away, not the women. If you do want to text me on that, it's 81333. Start your message with WM. And as I say, talking to your calls about...
Sex workers and curb crawlers in Birmingham are being warned of a new crackdown on prostitution by police in the city. Under Operation Scarlet, if sex workers get 3 cautions, they'll be arrested and sent straight to court. Nearly 40 prostitutes have been cautioned so far, with 7 arrested. Officers are focusing on the Hagley Road in Edgbaston and Ladywood. Catherine Stevens has been working in the sex industry for over 10 years. She's told Adrian Goldberg crackdowns like this don't always work.
What happens when you have a crackdown is that people will work over a wider area, so there's greater impact on the community because they're trying to avoid the police. They'll have to work longer hours to earn the same money. So again, there's more impact on the community. So it's not, and also it's known, there's evidence that it increases the dangers people face because people will work in more isolated areas.
The head of...
Let's get a word with Anil in Great Bar. Hello, Anil. You want to talk about red light districts and the like? Hello, mate.
Hello, yeah. How you doing? Yeah.
Yeah, welcome. Go on, mate.
Yeah, basically, what's actually happened is during the last year, the sexually transmitted diseases have increased by 1,000% in Birmingham only, nowhere else in the country. And this is putting a burden on the NHS services. So the pimps and the girls should be paying for the medical treatment they get from this. Because even if somebody's skin touches each other, even their hand, and they've got sexually transmitted diseases, it can be passed on to one person to another. So a lot of
not from your hand, not by your hand, Anil.
No. If your leg touches you, even the skin, yes.
No, it can't. It can't, Anil. Only by blood to blood can sexual diseases be transmitted.
And the one which has come out recently, gonorrhea or whatever, it can be passed from skin as well. And the people don't realise that.
I don't think so. I think that's on a par with saying that you can catch it from toilet seats, Anil. Do you see much prostitution as you go out and about?
Yeah, we have quite a lot by the West Bromwich Albion ground. You got the Romanian girls there, and also we get quite a lot on Heathfield Road.
Which was what was mentioned by one of our earlier callers as well in Handsworth. What do you think of it when you see Anil? Do you just say,
it's very bad because what's actually happening is... it's leading to all these diseases, and it affects the society. You get the drug dealers coming in, because what actually happens is most of these girls are on brown and cocaine, brown meaning heroin, and, it's the pimps who are making the money at the end of the day.
So do you think most of the women involved are victims rather than perpetrators?
It's 50-50. You've got a mixture of drug addicts, and you've got some genuine ones as well. But, I mean, this is the oldest profession, in the world, and it's been around for centuries. And basically, it will continue forever. I mean, it might be a good idea if they legalized it, but, and then at least they're paying tax or whatever. It's a very difficult one.
Anil, thanks very much indeed for joining us this morning. We were contacted as well by Laura. Laura, good morning to you.
Good morning.
And you are a sex worker?
I am indeed.
Tell me how you got into it, if you don't mind.
Oh, gosh, I've been working for quite a long time now, just under 20 years, although I've retired 3 times and never had a carriage clock yet. There you go.
You've retired 3 times and...
Never had a carriage clock yet.
Go. What were you, why did you get into it, though? Was it because you were hooked on drugs, which is what some people say? Were you forced into it by a pimp? Did you decide it was just better than, I don't know, being a secretary or working in an office?
I was going through university, and a lot of my friends were working 3-4 nights a week in a bar or a restaurant, and I took the rather unorthodox route of being the Saturday girl in the local massage parlour.
And what did that mean? I mean, I don't mean to be graphic with me, but what did the Saturday girl in the massage parlour mean?
It's sex work, basically. So I don't have any regrets. The industry has been very good for me, actually. And like Catherine, I really enjoy my work.
Do you?
I do, absolutely, yeah.
People listening to this, myself included, might be puzzled to hear that you could enjoy a job in which you have sex with people who are perfect strangers. Perfect strangers may well be, even if you look at it physically, very attractive, may smell nice. Perfect strangers may be smelly and horrible, let's face it.
Well, if they're smelly, we just frog march them to the shower. You know, there's ways around everything. It's not a job to suit everybody, but then again, neither is nursing, you know. I made an informed decision to go into the industry, and I did a lot of reading and research first, so I knew what I was taking on.
You, like Catherine, who was on earlier, Laurie, you sound like a very intelligent woman, clearly very eloquent. Not all of the women who are drawn to your trade are as intelligent, are as eloquent, though, and they don't make a choice in the same way that you have done.
Well, that's as may be, but I do think that as a society, if that choice is being taken away from those women, then what we need to be looking at are the background factors that are driving them into the trade, such as poverty and drug addiction, not prostitution itself.
I'm always puzzled, Laura. You work indoors, I think, yes? You've mentioned massage parlours. You work sort of in a you're not a street walker, so to speak. So why is it that some women end up on the street selling their bodies when we know it's a business that can be carried out, whether legally or not, sort of relatively safely behind closed doors?
Well, first of all, we don't say we sell our bodies, we sell our services, because, you know, if and when I decide to sell a kidney, you'll be the first to know. Secondly, the reason they work outside is because it's instant. It's instantaneous. The punters are there straight away. And if they need money immediately, that's how to do it.
Do you have sympathy with the residents, though, who are disturbed by the activities of those girls who work on the streets?
I do, of course. I mean, you know, obviously antisocial behaviour can't be condoned in any respect, but, you know, my first concern would be for the welfare of the sex workers, because if they're labouring under an addiction or poverty, or even if they're being pimped, etc., then the very last thing that they need to have happen to them is to be arrested and, you know, to be fined, because they'll just go straight back out on the streets and work the money up to pay the fines off. It's nonsensical.
Well, interestingly, that is the policy, I understand, of West Midlands Police. They are trying to offer the girls alternatives as well. You know, they say they are trying to steer them towards the services that would help them. But I guess if you don't address the root problem, be it poverty, be it drug addiction, those girls who already have this as their way of life are going to continue to have it as their way of life, aren't they?
Yes, of course they are. So what I would strongly advocate is the Merseyside model, where, and I'm not sure because I didn't catch the first part of the show, so I'm not sure if Catherine has covered this yet or not. But in Liverpool, the police have been treating crimes against sex workers as hate crimes. And so they've been working alongside the girls, not against them. And it's been fantastic because they've cottoned on to the fact that, first of all, the girls are valuable sources of information. Second of all, the girls are not going to go away. That's just not going to happen. All that will happen is that they'll move. So now they work to protect them rather than against them, and it's a win-win situation for everybody, and it sends out a clear message to perpetrators of crime against sex workers that it will not be tolerated.
Laura, I just want to come back to your enjoyment of your job. Most people have sex as part of a loving relationship, whether they're married or whether they're just in a relationship. How can you enjoy having sex with somebody you may never have met before and you probably never will meet again?
I think, to be honest, sometimes that is part of the thrill for me, though. Like, I still get butterflies in my stomach when I'm walking down the corridor of a hotel, and I think the day that stops is the day I need to give up my job, because that's part of the attraction for me. Also, you know, some of my clients that I have now have been with me for years and years, and we're really good pals. And in some respects, it kind of feels like a relationship.
Really, really interesting. Laura, thank you so much for joining us on the show this morning. That's Laura, another sex worker, joining in the discussion on BBC WM. 08453 00 9956. Or comments as well about prostitution this morning. This is from, I'm just seeing the name at the bottom, Viv, who says, I support the police operation. This is Operation Scarlet. I live in Ladywood. I note many ill-formed or tolerant comments are from people who don't live in areas where prostitutes operate. The police operations impede the prostitutes. If left unchecked, they take over the whole area day and night. We experienced this about 15 years ago. The combined efforts of the residents, neighbours, police and councillors helped to curb it, but it is on the rise again. I think the police are doing an excellent job and we should get behind them. Catherine, who was our prostitute who spoke earlier, says she works with many disabled people in a private way. This is a very different punter to those we see in our area on the streets. Do you also stand on street corners? She asked Catherine. Do you have sex in cars outside residential houses, in car parks or in gardens? Do you accost passing men to ask if they want business or to get into their stationary cars? Has she ever been attacked by a punter? Her experience is at a very different level and gives a very distorted view. It's not just the prostitutes themselves, it's the associated drug dealers, curb crawlers and criminals. Many of the prostitutes are underage girls who've been introduced to drugs by pimp boyfriends. It is not the sanitised version described by Catherine. Apart from working with this very restricted group of clients, how is she qualified to comment on the wider issues around prostitution? And what are the references for her statistics? I would like to ask Catherine where she gets her figures about child sex exploitation and human trafficking. Even the government have acknowledged the high incidence. If I can find the documentation, I will send it to you. I didn't hear the first part of the programme. Why don't you get someone who works with organisations that support the victims of child prostitution? Viv, thank you very much indeed for that email. Viv lives in Ladywood, very much in support of the police operation, Operation Scarlet. Are you? If